Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Supak. I'm in the Center for Geospatial Analytics, which is housed in the College of Natural Resources. I teach our large asynchronous online Intro to GIS classes at both the graduate and undergraduate level. And I'm going to share my presentation now here. So first, I wanted to give a big thank you to Sarah and Jennifer, who were my guides on this adventure this semester. They were amazingly responsive and helped me troubleshoot many of the things I'm going to show you in the next few slides. And the class that I was working on is my graduate level class, although this peer-to-peer engagement piece is important for both my undergrad and grad class. In my undergrad class, they currently are sort of replying to each other, so there is a little more peer engagement there. But in my grad class, they weren't doing any of that. So, but they're generating these beautiful map products. And this is actually just an example I have from the undergrad class that looks at how different the products that they produce at the end of each module can be. And you can't read them here, but there's all sorts of different ways people have chosen to title their maps and positions they place things and things like that. So I wanted to be able to, for students to not just see what other people are doing, but also sort of think about what might be applicable for them to incorporate into their future designs. And after having done some reading about what tools and talking to several of my friends at Delta, it sort of sounded like Perusall was going to be the tool that I should give a try. So that is where I headed. Again, this is a little bit more about the class. I've already said some of these things. The grad class has between 70 and 110 students in it each semester. I have lots of TAs that help me address many of the grading related aspects of the course. But a year ago, I moved the sort of assignments, which are the learning piece of the course, to be ungraded or self-evaluative. So students fill out a large spreadsheet that have each of the skills. And so they're working on that, but they still have to produce these products at the end of each of these assignments that are these specific either map layouts or web mapping applications. So for the last 2 semesters in this class, I was using Moodle Q&A forums where students basically were told to insert their map image, link their table that talks about their skills for that specific assignment. And then the last part is to reflect on their map design and identify areas they would like feedback on. Right now, or previously, the TAs would do all of the feedback for them. There wasn't, even though if they're asking for feedback, it's very possible that somebody else could be able to provide feedback who's in the class and is also on this thread, as everybody would be once they post their map layouts. Which again, the Q&A forum is the one where you can't see what other people have posted until you've posted. And here's that example of the private reply from a TA, talking about their color choice and things like that. So this was the style that I was using up until assignment 7 this semester, which, out of 11 total assignments. You could tell sort of like March time. By that point, Sarah and Jennifer and I had many conversations, and I thought, let's just go for it, and let's implement this semester and see how it goes. And then especially because then I can take that information and decide how I want to implement next semester from the beginning, knowing some things. So this was the implementation. It's sort of a busy screen, but basically we got it out there. For the last 4 assignments are choice assignments where the students get to select 3 out of the 4. They're invited to do all 4 if they can and have the bandwidth, but only 3 are required based on their personal interest, because the topics range from like taking an address and creating a point from that address and interpolating surfaces. So somebody who needs that one skill maybe doesn't need the other skill, because I have students from all across the university taking this course, international studies and engineers and the whole like. So the tricky parts are, well, I'll get to the tricky parts here. All right, so pre-implementation, there were a couple of decisions that had to be made. The first was, how do we allow all these students to upload their own content to Perusall and then allow this peer-to-peer commenting? So unfortunately, the assignments wasn't going to work for us for two specific reasons. And again, this is a big shout out to Sarah for identifying these. This is her language from a previous email I grabbed. Basically, all the uploads needed to happen before the assignment could be created. And another tricky part of my classes is that I use rolling deadlines. So I give lots of flexibility to my students. And those of you that have worked with rolling deadlines know that software and support for learning technologies doesn't love that usually. So it's like, okay, well, all right. So that wasn't going to work for that reason. Another reason is that assignments only support assigning uploaded file to each student or to a group. So you would only have that, you wouldn't get that true. I was hoping to get like, a person to evaluate 3 other map products, but that wasn't going to work with the assignments. So we were left with the idea of library folders. Oh, wait, yeah, folders, right. And subfolders. That was another thing that first didn't seem like you could do, but it turned out that you could. Again, shout out to my team for helping figure that out. Essentially, all you have to do is create a folder not inside the structure and drag it in using the 3 horizontal bars. So that was great. But there were like I had these priorities in terms of like how to structure this system. And I wanted to because of my rolling deadlines, I wanted to break up the subfolders by time so that students wouldn't have to wait too long to get feedback from other students. However, there was an issue that was great, and I'll hold that thought for a second. And the other thing was I wanted to find a way that would best support students providing feedback to those 3 other students. So when it came time to actually launch this, it was pretty a narrow window of getting it up in time for these last 4 assignments the students were choosing. But Sarah made an awesome instructional video that is linked for the students. And I wrote out really detailed instructions for the first step being selecting the group within the subfolder, then uploading their map layout, then engaging with people who had already uploaded their content, and finally returning to see the engagement with their content as it comes in. There were a couple issues that came up, though, things that I think were interesting and definitely things that are applicable to other people as I try to implement these. So the first obstacle was file types, hanging files, and file size. So I asked Perusall if there were any file size restrictions, because my students were seeing some of their stuff hanging. And they wrote back and said, no, there's no file size restriction. However, we don't accept PNGs. But if you look at the image on the right-hand side of one of the folders that's been filled out, this is the assignment 8 group 4. There's 15 students that are supposed to choose this group. You can see that there were PNGs that clearly weren't working, but Perusall told us that. But there were also JPEGs that were totally hung. So I think they probably do have file size restrictions. They're just not telling us. But no PNGs, still sort of weird. The second obstacle was that students couldn't see any of the comments made by other students, but instructors could. It turned out that there was a setting within Perusall for auto groups such that only people who are in your same group would be able to see the comments, or you'd be able to see their comments. So because we don't actually want any grouping, we just needed to turn that setting off. But at first, it made some of my students a little cranky, but they got over it. Obstacle number 3, who can delete? So in the Q&A forum, students also can't delete if they make a bad post or erroneous thing. So in this case, it's not a big deal, but I did have several students who either uploaded the wrong file, uploaded a file type that we didn't know was the wrong, and so they would email me. And so I got a lot of, 80 people in the class, I got many emails. Would you please delete this thing I uploaded? So here was an example of the exchange between me and one of the students. Another thing is, and this was something you saw earlier, I showed you that I use private replies for the TAs to be able to give those comments and that constructive feedback to their students in their group. But currently there is not a way to allow the instructors in Perusall to leave those private replies. However, I have heard that was recently added to assignments. So hopefully that's something that we can have added to folders if we email Perusall a few times and have a few people write them and make that request. I'm hopeful because I do it's like a balancing act. I need to have the TAs to be able to comment, but I also want peer-to-peer engagement. Can it happen in one place? This would be a step towards that. And finally, this is what I alluded to earlier, the TA oversight versus rolling deadlines. So at the end of the semester, the self-evaluation piece for the course is a portfolio where the students sort of request a grade they think represents their effort and achievement with the learning portion of the course. But one of the things they're supposed to do is if they don't complete all the learning parts of the course because they just didn't make it to the end of the course, they had other things they had to take care of, that happens a lot, or at least it does in the undergrad class. We'll see how there are a lot of students that are behind in it right now. So those students, we need to have an easy way for the TAs to tell if they just completed the work, not the quality of the work at all, but just did they actually produce a product for these things. But unfortunately, there's no way in Perusall, with what we're doing right now, that would tell us whether or not a student uploaded. We could get a report about their engagement, but a student could go and comment without having actually created the product and uploaded the product. So one of the ways that I'm going to change this for next semester is that I'm going to have the groups have TA names in them. The upside of this is that TAs will easily be able to go and just see who's uploaded things and take a look at them really quickly. The downside is that it may lead to much longer wait times between when a student uploads their product and when they get feedback back from fellow students. If they're waiting for people that are just in their TA group, not people who are completing the assignment at the similar time as them. And bring it all together here, I had a few sort of aha moments while I was making this presentation. And it's that I think at the beginning of the course, I need something like, I definitely need private comments because TAs need to be able to redirect people as they're doing these initial exercises where they're learning how to create these things. But towards the end of the course, once they've sort of got some footing and are better at creating the objects, then talking to each other is more beneficial. So I think I'm going to continue using both in the future, and I'm just going to continue to use Perusall as this part of the choice assignments. So that is sort of where I ended up and how I'm going to continue on for next semester.